Okay, welcome back. We continue in our journey. Last week we concluded the blessings of the morning. And now we begin the prayer of the morning, the introduction to the prayer of the morning. Before we start the prayer of the morning, page 12, Alter Rebbe says that it's appropriate to recite the following line before the prayer. Hareini Mikabel Mitzvahs Aseh Shel V'Ahavta L'Reacha Kamocha. I hereby take upon myself to fulfill the positive commandment to love your fellow Jew like yourself. And the source for this is actually from the Arizal. So even though the source is Kabbalistic and the Kabbalah is not for every single Jew, yet Alter Rebbe placed it here in the prayer book, which is written for every Jew, even a Jew who can't even study, not let alone Kabbalah. And Alter Rebbe wrote it in the Siddur. And it's interesting that the Kabbalah, and it's also brought down in the Code of Jewish Law, the Alter Rebbe brings down this Code of Jewish Law. There it says in the source that it's appropriate that a person should accept upon himself the mitzvah of love your fellow Jew like yourself. It doesn't say anywhere you have to say it. Alter Rebbe adds that it's proper and it's appropriate that a person should say it, recite it with your mouth and say the words, I take upon myself, I accept upon myself the mitzvah of love your fellow Jew like yourself. So why is that? So the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe writes, he says, first, you have to go step by step. First there's thought, then there's speech, and then there's action. In the Kabbalah, it says you should think. Alter Rebbe says you should also say it. And then comes the action. What's the action? The action is what we say immediately following it. We say, Matoivo elecha Yaakov, how goodly are your tents, Yaakov, Mishkenesecha Yisrael, your dwelling places, O Israel. What does he mean? What's he referring to? This is from the prophecy of Bilam, who wanted to curse the Jewish people, instead it ended up praising the Jewish people. So what's his praise? How good are your tents and your dwelling places. The Medrash says it means he was praising the Jewish houses of worship, the Jewish houses of study, the shul, the yeshiva, the Beis HaMedrash. How wonderful where a Jew lives. A Jew lives in the shul. He lives in the house of study. He comes to study the Torah of Hashem, and he comes to daven to Hashem and to speak to Hashem. So Bilam was appreciating the praising the Jewish people. And Rashi says that he was praising the tents of the Jewish people, because the tents of the Jewish people, when they were camped in the desert, the doors were not facing each other. So the simple reason is because of modesty. They shouldn't see each other. They shouldn't look into another person's tent. So the previous Rebbe explained. He says, you have the way the Jew is at home, and you have the way the Jew is when he's in public, when he's in shul. We reserve our best behavior when we're in shul. When we're in shul, we're in the public, the Beis HaMedrash, we put on our best behavior. We have our public persona. Then when we come home, we let our hair down. We're not exactly on the same level we are at home as we are in the public. So the mitzvah of love your fellow Jew like yourself is, you should always see the good in the other Jew. Always see them in their best light. So that's what he said, Matoivo elecha Yaakov, how good are your tents? That we don't look at the Jew the way when he's at home, how he is at home. We look at the Jew the way how he is in the shul. And even though the shul is our best behavior, but that's how we look at them. We try to find and look and see him in his best light possible. And then we try, out of our love for our fellow Jew, we try to make sure to help the Jew that he should become at home the way he is in shul. To elevate himself, that even at home when he's alone and private, when he lets his hair down, he should also be on the same level as he presents himself in the shul. Okay, this was when the previous Rebbe became bar mitzvah. So at his bar mitzvah, his father, the Rebbe Rashab, turned to him and said, every Rebbe by his bar mitzvah, his father turned to him and asked him, ask a question. So in that tradition, I'm turning to you and asking you to ask me a question. And the question of the Fidik Rebbe by his bar mitzvah, his first initiation into mitzvahs, into bar mitzvah, was why the Alter Rebbe plays this introduction to prayer. Hareini Mikabel Intro. Yes, love your fellow Jews, very important mitzvah. It's a klal gadol. Rabbi Akiva says it's a great rule in the Torah. But what's that have to do with prayer? Ma kesher, what's the connection? I'm about to pray to Hashem. Prayer is all about me, focusing on myself and focusing inward and working with myself and within myself. So now I'm about to pray and I'm about to talk to Hashem. Why are you bringing me? There's mitzvah between man and man. And there's mitzvah between man and Hashem. Right now, I'm about to pray. I'm getting ready to pray. I'm starting to pray to strengthen, rejuvenate, recharge my connection with Hashem. Why are you introducing now, at this point, at this moment, the mitzvah of love your fellow Jew like yourself? What's the connection? The Rebbe Rashab answered. He said, because prayer is a time when you're petitioning Hashem, you're asking Hashem to fulfill all your needs, both materially and spiritually. You're talking to Hashem. He says, what's the greatest nachas? The greatest nachas that children can give to their parents. There's no greater nachas for no greater pride and joy for parents when they see that children get along with each other. When they see that one sibling cares about the other sibling and thinks about the other sibling, cares about the other sibling, inconvenience themselves with the other sibling, they're in heaven. That's their biggest joy and pride. The reverse is also true. God forbid, children don't get along with each other. That's their living hell. All their success, their money means nothing if the children don't get along with each other. When children are there for each other and get along with each other and are selfless and truly, genuinely care for each other, then that gives nachas to the parent. So the Rebbe Rashab says, when you're about to pray to Hashem, you're about to ask Hashem to answer all your needs. So this is the introduction to prayer. When Hashem sees that you really care about another Yid, you care, all Jews are brothers and sisters, we're family. When he sees that we all get along with each other, and we're there for each other, and we care for each other, and we love each other, and respect each other, and like each other, and see the good qualities in each other, and do favors for each other, this is when Hashem will answer all our prayers. Then there's nothing Hashem won't do to that person, that individual, who's bringing so much unity of the Jewish family. Then Hashem will answer all our prayers. Rebbe Rashab says that in one of his Maimarim, he says that the reason why this is the introduction to prayer, because prayer is a time when we connect with godliness, with holiness. The ultimate is by Shema, when you love Hashem with all your heart and all your soul, when you daven, you're standing in front of Hashem. But the entrance, the entree, the opening of holiness is, what's the sign that this is truly holy, that holiness is achdus, unity. With this unity, Hashem echad, Hashem is one. So the sign of holiness is there must be unity. If there's unity, then that's the minimum. That's the minimum requirement. That's the without that, I'm not even in the door. So before you start prayer, before you start your working your way towards holiness, connection, the first step is there has to be unity. If there's love between one Jew and the next, then Hashem says, okay, now you have access to me. Now we can start working and start advancing and moving forward. But if there's no unity, you can't even move forward. You can't even begin. So that's the first thing. Before you start, you have to make sure that there's unity. That's a sign you have a connection to holiness. If there's no unity, if one Jew is angry at the other Jew, and one Jew doesn't get along with the other Jew, and one Jew doesn't respect the other Jew, one Jew looks down at the other Jew, you can't even begin. You can't even start. Why are you wasting your time? What are you doing? So before you say the first word of prayer, the first thing you have to establish is that there's unity. Achdus. Hareini Mikabel mitzvahs Hashem. Tzemach Tzedek says that Derech Mitzvah he says the reason we have to say Hareini Mikabel in the beginning, before we start our prayer, is because the Jewish people are like a living organism. One dynamic, holistic organism. Every individual Jew is an individual organ in this organism. Now, it's like the body. The body is a living organism. The body is one. There's no politics in the body. The conservative part of the body and the liberal part of the body, the right and the left, get along very well. There's no politics. Even though each side is even opposite of each other and each organ is unique and different, and yet there's total unity. There's many levels to this unity. There is the way the organism is unified in the mind and the brain, which is the command and control center of the whole organism. That's why all the nerve systems end up in the brain. When you feel pain, the brain feels the pain. The brain feels every part of the body. So the organism is unified, and the brain is where it centers, its focus. You feel that unity. So there, it's all unified. But even on a deeper level, even within each organism, as each organism is separate and apart and unique, all the organs are connected to each other. That's why you find, the olden days, they used to do bloodletting. Even today with acupuncture, right? The energy that flows when you want to heal the ear, whatever, you do something in the leg, and the current, the energy that flows, or the blood, the same blood flows, and you do something in one organ, and it helps and heals the other organ. Because all the organs are connected with each other. Every organ is found within each other. So there's the ear and the leg and the ear. It's all connected. And that's why the Torah says, love your fellow Jew like yourself, because your fellow Jew is yourself, because we are truly one. We are one living organism, one dynamic organism. And even as we are apart and separate, but nevertheless, we are truly part of something larger, greater than all of us put together. We are part of, the whole is greater than the sum total of its parts. and we all are connected with each other. So therefore, when I love you, I'm really loving myself, because there's me inside of you and there's you inside of me. But that's only true if you truly love your fellow Jew like yourself. What if there's no love between you and the other Jew? Then it's as if that Jew, that part of you is missing. Since you've disconnected yourself from your fellow Jew, you've disconnected yourself from that organ, so a part of you is missing. Then you are defective. Prayer is a substitute for the sacrifice. The Torah says you can't offer to Hashem a defective sacrifice. So if you present yourself to Hashem and in your heart there's hatred, disrespect, rancor, anger, tension, friction with one other Jew, then you're defective. Hashem says, throw this animal off my altar. Get out of here. What are you doing? You can't offer yourself, come close to Hashem. You're thrown off, you're thrown away. So you can't prayer. In order to pray, first you have to be whole. You have to present yourself as whole, as complete, as a whole sacrifice, as a whole. Well, if you are angry in your heart against a fellow Jew, you're not whole. So the prayer is disqualified from the get-go. So the first thing you have to do is you have to establish Hareini Mikabel Intro. Now, it's a very interesting analogy. As Alter Rebbe points out in the heart of the Tanya, chapter Lev, Lamed Beis, in the first part of the Tanya, TanyaClass.com, that yes, the organism, it's a very good analogy. The body is one. We are one living dynamic organism. Because firstly, in the brain, we're all one. And the energy levels are all connected, the energy of the leg and the energy of the heart and the energy of it's all connected. And therefore you can heal one by doing something with the other because it's all connected. The energy, the flow, it's all connected. And all organs include all the other organs in them. But on the physical level, the physical arm is separate from the leg. When your leg hurts, my arm doesn't hurt. I feel the pain in my leg. The brain feels the pain in the leg. My arm doesn't hurt because my arm is a separate organ. The physical arm is separate from the physical leg. Yes, we're all one living organism, one dynamic organism, all related, all interconnected. But that's only on the internal level. But the physical arm and the physical leg are separate. Arm is an arm, a leg is a leg. And the proof is when the leg hurts, the hand doesn't hurt. So Alter Rebbe says in chapter 32, if a person is physical, if a person is all about your physical and being corporal, material, if your whole life is about materialism, then each person is apart, each person is separate. My ego couldn't care less about your ego. So if my life is all about being egotistical and being corporal and physical and material, then I don't feel your pain. I couldn't care less about you. And you don't feel me. And not only that, not only you don't feel each other's pain, but the nature of the world is no two people look alike and no two people think alike. And that's why we have our way of thinking. And as a matter of fact, I can't stand another person's way of thinking. I think my way of thinking is correct, my way or the highway. And anyone else who thinks differently because Hashem made him differently, because he looks differently and he thinks differently and he feels differently, I can't tolerate anyone else's thinking. I have to cancel them. This intolerance comes from ego. When you're more egotistical you are, the more arrogant you are, the more corporal, the more physical, material, coarse and crass you are, the more you love yourself, and you can't stand the other person. The other person rubs you the wrong way, his way of thinking and his way of feeling. I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. It's ridiculous. The only way to achieve to truly achieve love your fellow Jew like yourself is a person has to crush that arrogance, that foolish, superficial sense of ego, of I. You have to be brokenhearted. When you're brokenhearted, and the person is brokenhearted, the person is undergoing something painful in his life, was brokenhearted, and his ego is suddenly deflated, his balloon and bubble is deflated, and is reduced to his true value, what he's really worth, not his inflated image of self. Arrogant, completely out of touch image of self, but your true value. When you're humbled, when your heart is crushed and you're humble, suddenly you become humane. Suddenly you see the good in the other person. You're not so ivory tower, so your nose up the ear. Suddenly you come down to earth. Suddenly you see the beautiful qualities in everyone around you. How much you could learn from everyone around you. So when a person, it's the ego, the body, the physical that separates us. When a person is all about the body, the physical, then you are you, I am I, and what's yours is mine. What's mine is surely mine. When can a person feel, it says in Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 5, Shali Shalach, what's mine is yours. That's only a person whose neshama is in touch with his neshama. When you're in touch and you experience your neshama, when you're able to crack that shell, that surface, that superficial sense of self and foolish sense of self and foolish sense of arrogance, entitlement, exaggerated sense of self-worth, where a person is so self-absorbed that you become cold and indifferent to everyone around you, and you're obsessed with your own indulgences, and everything is all about me, myself, and I, which blocks out. All it takes is put your finger in front of your eyes and it blocks out the whole world. It blocks out anyone else but yourself. You become so narrow-minded and so narrowly focused that all you can see is yourself, and you don't realize. The hand only sees the hand. Instead of the hand, there's a leg, and there's 248 limbs, and we're all one, and there's so much. So this is the prerequisite in order to be able to daven, in order to be able to present yourself in front of Hashem, in order to connect with Hashem, in order to get off the runway. You can't start flying. You can't even begin your journey before you've experienced and you've taken upon yourself. You make the resolution. And that's why it's important to say it. It's not enough to think it. Because thinking, I love my fellow Jew like myself, thinking involves your neshama. But your body is not engaged. The problem is your body doesn't feel that love for your fellow Jew like yourself. Your neshama maybe feels it. But your body is not on the same page. Your body is not with the program. Because on a bodily level, my body and your body, my ego and your ego, I'm a hand, you're a leg. I don't feel your pain. I'm separate, I'm apart, I'm different than you. On a purely physical level, I am separate from you. And that's why it's important to say it. When you say, you move your lips, it's a physical act, you're moving your lips. In other words, you have to love your fellow Jew like yourself. You have to bring it down even on the bodily level. That your ego shouldn't get in the way. And that you should truly feel and love your fellow Jew like yourself. Because there's 3 different ways you can love your fellow Jew like yourself. You can love your fellow Jew like yourself because we're Jews. I love all Jews. I'm part of the Jewish people. I'm a proud member of the Jewish people. The Jewish people, we are an eternal people. We are a godly people. We're a holy people. We're one living organism. The whole is greater than the sum total of its parts. It includes every Jew from Avram and Sarah till the end of time. So we're all part of the same people. We're all Jewish. I love you, period. That's a very general love. I love you because you're Jewish. And that's enough. But then you get a little more specific. I love every Jew as an individual. I love them not only because they're Jewish, but because every Jew, just like in the living organism, in the body, every organ is unique. Every organ contributes something special and unique to the whole. The liver delivers something that only a liver can do. A kidney does what only a kidney can do. And the entire organism is dependent on that kidney being a kidney and on the heart being a heart and every organ in the body doing its part. So we're all connected and all interrelated and interconnected, that we need the unique qualities of each and every individual. So everyone is we're not just monolithic, we're Jewish and we're all the same. No, even each one of us is also a unique individual. Each one of us brings a flavor to the Jewish experience. There never was a Jew like you, there never will be. If everyone looks differently, if you took all the Jews throughout all the generations, everyone looks differently, thinks differently, processes information, experiences things differently. What Shabbat means to you is not what it means to someone else. It's dynamic, it's fluid, it's real. Everyone is unique and contribute something. So I love each individual, not only because they're Jewish, period, because they're bringing something special to the Jewish experience, and we all learn from each other and we all need each other. But even then, I love every Jew because that Jew is adding something to me. That Jew is adding something, adding a flavor, adding a twist, an insight, or something that no one else can see and no one else can experience, can touch upon like that person. So that Jew is making me whole. Without that Jew, I wouldn't be whole. I would be missing something. Without the leg, the kidney is missing something. Every organ in the body is missing something. Without the contribution, the unique contribution of each and every organ, the rest of the organism is missing. But then there is the Jew, every individual Jew, as they are. In the physical form, hand, leg, each one is apart. Each one is separate, independent. You don't feel each other. The leg hurts. I don't feel, the hand doesn't feel the pain of the leg. And yet, when every Jew is in their own unique self, and yet we all get along with each other. We all love each other. Because at the end of the day, every organ, what is my essence? What is the essence of the kidney? It's not being a kidney. The essence of the kidney is I am part of something larger than all of us put together. It's not about being a kidney. There's one essence. There's one point. There's one living organism that expresses itself in 248 different ways. But it's one essence. There's only one essence that expresses itself in every part of the body in its own unique way. But they're all expressing one and the same core and essential essence. There's nothing else. And therefore, even when every organ is unique, totally unique, they totally get along with each other. There's absolutely no politics in the human body. Even between the physical hand and the physical leg, and the physical right hand and the physical left. There's no liberal, there's no conservative, there's no right, there's no left. Because even though they're so different and even opposites and so unique, but the essence is the same. There's one person, there's one living organism, there's one essence. It's like the Jewish people are one soul. It's divided into 14 million bodies, but it's one soul, it's one essence. So therefore, even our uniqueness, even our individuality, even what differentiates us, it's all the same essence. So I can truly love you like myself, literally like I love myself. Even when you are in all your differentiation, when you're different and unique, and you are you and I am I, and you think differently and look differently and feel differently and experience things differently, and yet my love for you is 100%. And that's why it's important to say it, to physically say it, move your lips, that even the physical, that even on the physical level, not just on the metaphysical or spiritual level, even when every Jew goes about his own unique life, and yet you love that Jew. Literally like you love yourself. Literally like you love yourself. And davening is a time when you're working on yourself. It's a very personal, very spiritual moment. You're focusing on yourself. You're working with yourself, on yourself. You're turning inward. The ultimate davening, you close your eyes. Even you're davening in shul with a minyan, but everyone is lost in their own prayer. Everyone is talking to Hashem personally and privately and intimately. Everyone is experiencing loving Hashem with all your heart and all your soul. So it's very personal, it's very individual. It's a personal relationship that you have with Hashem that transcends your relationships, your social relations. That's why when we daven, we don't sit with our spouse. Our relationship with Hashem precedes and transcends our social relations. It's very personal. Everyone is lost in their own davening, in their own totally immersed in their relationship with Hashem. And yet, the first step we tell a Jew is you have to love every Jew with all your heart and all your soul. Not only a Jew that's on your level. You're on a very high level, obviously. You're davening. You just finished saying the blessings of the davening. You said Moda'ani. You washed Negovasser. You made blessings. You already started doing such important mitzvahs, the talis and the tefillin. You're putting on your gartel. You're already starting to daven. You're already on a whole different, you live in a different universe. There could be a Jew who is still asleep, who maybe just woke up. He's so far from connecting and meditating and focusing. And we tell this Jew who's about to daven and to reach the highest levels and achieve and accomplish the greatest spiritual heights, the deepest levels of meditation and spirituality and godliness and holiness. And we tell this Jew, first thing you have to do is you have to connect with your fellow Jew. Every other Jew. Even a Jew so far away from you, not just physically far away from you, but even as the Baal Shem Tov says, at the end of the world, but even someone who's spiritually at the end of the world, the other end of the world, the other end of the spectrum. The first thing you have to do, you have to connect with that Jew. Because you have to remember the whole purpose of creation, the whole purpose of existence is we have to elevate the whole world. We have to elevate. And the way to elevate, when you want to elevate, when you want to lift up a building, how do you elevate the building? You got to go underneath. You have to go to the lowest part, underneath the foundations, and lift it up. To lift up a building, you have to lift it up from below. You don't lift it up from the top. You'll separate the top from the bottom. You have to go underneath the building and lift it up from the bottom. So when you're connecting, you want to connect to the highest levels. You want to reach the heavens. First, you got to start. You got to go all the way to the bottom. underneath the foundations and lift it up from the bottom. You have to connect with each and every Jew. Even a Jew so far at the edge of the world, the end of the world, materially or even spiritually. Now, the question is, how could there be a commandment to love? Love your fellow Jew like yourself. How do you command someone to love? You can command someone to do. I love or I don't love. If I don't love, commanding me is not going to make me love. I can't pretend that I love if I don't. So the simple level, Rashi says, that the mitzvah, he says, he says, this is a great rule. In other words, this is the general overarching rule that includes all mitzvah, that includes all the mitzvah that the man and man. So this is like a generalization. The Torah is telling you, love your fellow Jew like itself, which expresses itself. Don't take revenge on your fellow Jew. Treat the other Jew respectfully. In other words, it's a practical commandment. Because indeed, you can't command someone to love. How can I command someone to love? But the literal meaning is no, love your fellow Jew like yourself. You should, means you should love your fellow Jew. It means love. How could you command someone to love? So some say that just like the same question you can ask in the mitzvah to love Hashem. How could there be a commandment to love Hashem? Either you do or you don't. You can't command someone to love. What's the answer? The Rambam said the mitzvah is under reflection. You have to meditate and reflect on the greatness of Hashem, and that's what you can do. And if you focus and meditate on the greatness of Hashem, that will lead you to love. If it does or it doesn't, you did your part. You can't force your heart to love. You do or you don't. But if you focus and concentrate on the greatness and the wisdom of Hashem, the greatness of Hashem, that will lead you to love Hashem, and that's what you could do. That you're responsible for. I can't control my heart. I could control my mind, what I can focus on, what I can concentrate on. And that's the mitzvah. So to over here, the mitzvah, love your fellow Jew like yourself, the mitzvah is to meditate, to reflect. Reflect on what? Reflect on the qualities of your friend. Reflect on the wonderful qualities of your friend. Everyone has good qualities. Now, Yom Yom, it says, Rav Zusha found, I think, 8 things, qualities, good qualities you can learn from a ganef. Everyone has good qualities. Everyone has qualities you can learn from. So if you reflect on the good qualities of your friend, that's the mitzvah. That's something you can command. I can't command you to love, but you could control your mind. And if you focus and concentrate and think about and meditate and reflect on all the good qualities of your friend, and everyone has good qualities, and you don't even have to dig so deep. Then automatically you'll come to love them. But deeper than that, Chassidus says, just like the love of Hashem, how could there be a mitzvah to love? The answer is you don't have to create that love. The love for Hashem is natural. You're born with it. You already love Hashem. The mitzvah is to reveal that love. That love which is hidden in the subconscious, you should become conscious of that love. The same is with Avos Yisrael. The Torah is not telling us to create something new. If the Torah would be telling us to create a new love, I can't stand the guy. What do you mean love? But the Torah is telling us the love is already there because the Jewish people were family. It's like brothers. It's a natural love. It's brothers and sisters. It's a natural love. It's a core love. It's an essential love. And all you have to do is reveal that love. That's something that you can do. That you can be commanded. I just have to reveal the love that's already there. That you could be commanded. I'm not asking you to create something new. The love is, you already love. The Torah is telling you one interpretation is v'ahavta, you will love. It's inevitable. V'ahavta Hashem Elokecha, you should love, but v'ahavta is you will love, because if the love is already there, inevitably that love will emerge and surface. So too with love your fellow Jew like yourself. One, you should love, but also you will love, because the love is already there. We do love each other. We're there for each other. We care for each other. And in moments of truth, you see it. during the 6-Day War, when they thought, God forbid, there'll be another Holocaust in Israel. They prepared a grave, over 100,000 casualties. The whole Jewish people came together in that moment of truth. There was no right, there was no left, there was no religious, non-religious. The whole Jewish people, that love, that core essential love just emerged in all its beauty. Because the love is there at all times, at all places. It's just buried, covered up, concealed. So that's the mitzvah. You should awaken that love and reveal the truth that we are all one and we're all connected. So the love of your fellow Jew has to be like a brotherly love, like you love your brother, you love your family. You know, if you discover that you have a brother or a sister you never knew you had, even though they could be your friends, you don't speak the same language, you never saw them in your life, you would feel suddenly so close to them, closer than someone you went to school with all your life, because it's blood, it's my brother, my sister. I just didn't know about him, but it's a core connection. It's not an acquired connection. It's innate, it's inherent. So the love of your fellow Jew also has to be, it's not enough just to love them. You have to love them because he's Jewish. Just because they're Jewish. Just because they're Jewish. And they're godly, and they have a godly soul. And we're all connected because we all have a Jewish soul. But in addition, you also have to try to love them individually. Try to see the good in everyone. Try to reflect on what's unique about them. Like you see a simple person, you love him for the sincerity, how genuine they are, how sincere they are, unself-conscious. There's no guile, there's no ears, it's just real, simple, sincere. You meet someone who's very complex and very brilliant and very talented. You have to love him and you have to have mercy on him also, because it says whoever is a greater person has a bigger Yetzer Hara, has bigger challenges. The person who is very complex and very multi-talented, to find his way in life, it's like a delicate machine. The smallest thing could destroy the whole thing. The space shuttle, because of a 5-cent piece or a quarter, the whole space shuttle blew up because of something that was worth a quarter that was off. So there's multi-billion-dollar, and all the astronauts lost their lives because of that smallest thing went wrong, and the whole thing just blew up. So you meet a person who's talented and brilliant and complex, you have to love him specifically, you have to have Rahmanism also, because you realize how difficult it is for that person to get his act together and to come out whole and harmonious, and everything should be worked out, because it's so complex and so complicated and such a big Yetzer Hara, and things can go wrong, the smallest thing, so delicate, that they can be so off. Like we see so many intellectuals who are so off. And the more brilliant they are, and the more talented they are, the more it's harder to find a wholesome person. That person should be 100% wholesome. Something. So you have to love and feel compassion and love for each individual, not just I love every Jew. You're Jewish, period. That's all I need to know. You're Jewish, I'm Jewish, and I love you because you're Jewish. That's yes. But you also have to get to know the individual as an individual, love them as an individual, and really understand them and love them for who they are and what they are in their circumstances. There's a big difference between there's love your fellow Jew like yourself, and then that's called Ahavat Yisrael, but then there's something deeper. It's called Achdut Yisrael. Love my fellow Jew like myself. There's I and there's the Jew, and I love him. Achdut Yisrael means there's no I and there's no you. You are I and I am you. There's no separation. We are absolutely one. And only then could you truly love your fellow Jew literally like you love yourself. Because the question is, how could you love your fellow Jew like yourself? Nachmanides says it's impossible. How could you tell a person to love another person like you love yourself? It's impossible. I care more about my pinky than about millions of people dying in Africa. It's just human nature. Our love for ourselves is infinite, is boundless, is limitless. We love ourselves unconditionally. How can you tell me I should love my fellow Jew like I love myself? I can't. Even by Jewish law, my life comes first. Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva, who said, love your fellow Jew like yourself, is a great rule. And the Torah said, if two people are traveling in the desert and there's only enough water for one, right? So Ben Petura said in the beginning, that used to be the halacha, you should divide it 50-50. You drink, and then we'll both die. But at least for now, we'll extend our life together for a short while. And Rabbi Akiva says no. And that became the halacha. Your life comes first. My life comes first. You drink the water and you'll survive and your friend will die. I have to take care of myself first. Love your fellow Jew like yourself. You have to love yourself before you can love someone else. You have to love the other person like you love yourself. So first you have to love and take care of yourself. So he says, Kam moicha. That's why Nachmanides says, Kam moicha means not literally like yourself. Like Kam moicha. Not literally like yourself, but like. Treat him respectfully, treat him nicely, like you like to be treated, but not literally. Comes along the Baal Shem Tov and says, no. You have to literally, like you love yourself. Just like you love yourself. It's unconditional. We don't see any faults in ourselves. That's why we can't accept any criticism. We hate criticism more than anything else in the world. We bristle at criticism because we love ourselves, despite all our faults. We know our own faults better than anyone else. Our critics don't even know half of it. We know the skeletons in our closet better than anyone. And yet, we still love ourselves unconditionally. Doesn't bother us. So I have faults, so. And that's why we can't accept criticism, because you're rejecting me. As a result, as a counter, because of my fault, you're rejecting me. That we can't accept. So love your fellow Jew like yourself. That even though you see faults, but you shouldn't see their faults. It shouldn't bother you. You should still love them. Just like you love yourself unconditionally, you should love them unconditionally. Because I literally love my fellow Jew, literally like I love myself, just like you love yourself. Do you love yourself because it's a mitzvah to love yourself? Because it's a religious commandment? Because it says in the code of Jewish law, you have to love yourself? No. You love yourself, it's the most natural thing in the world. You love yourself. So the Torah says, love your fellow Jew the same way, not because it's a religious commandment, it's a mitzvah. It has to be as natural, it has to be as genuine, it has to be as real as you love yourself. Because the other Jew is my son, and I am the other Jew. And I don't see any faults. I know my faults, but I don't see it. It doesn't bother me. I don't get upset. I don't get agitated when I see a fault in another person. So too, that's the sign whether you fulfill the mitzvah of love your fellow Jew like yourself, if you truly won. And that's what Hillel said. Rabbi Akiva said, love your fellow Jew like yourself. It's a great rule. Hillel said something even deeper. He says, what you hate to do to yourself, don't do to your fellow Jew. What do you hate to be done to you? What's the thing you hate most? Criticism. You can't take criticism because you love yourself unconditionally, despite all your faults. So when someone faults you and criticizes you and rejects you, you can't accept it, and you get very agitated. So when do I know that you truly love your fellow Jew like yourself, that you are one with your fellow Jew, and it's natural and it's genuine and it's real? When you don't fault another Jew. You see their faults, but you don't get agitated. You don't get excited, just like you don't get excited about your own fault. You sleep like a baby. It doesn't bother you. It doesn't disturb you. Yes, you care for your fellow Jew and you have to help them if you see they have a fault. But you help them like a doctor helps his patient. It's clinical, it's very cool, it's very cold. You don't judge. The doctor doesn't judge his patients. He knows he has to help and he'll help, but there's no criticism and there's no judging. So yes, there's a mitzvah to criticize your fellow Jew, but without judgment and without harshness and without hatred and without venom. Like when you sting the doctor before he gives a needle, he has to sterilize the wound. Before you sting and you criticize your fellow Jew, you have to sterilize and make sure there's not a shred of ego, of arrogance, of judgmentalism, of superiority, of looking down, of condemning, of harming, of being harsh. It has to be loving. And I'm here to help because I care about you. And I'm just here to help. I'm not judging. I love you. And I'm here to take care of you and to help you. That's all. So that's the deepest level. Achdus Yisrael, because Jews, we're inseparable. We're half. I'm half, you're half. I'm nothing without you. You're nothing without me. We're all the same essence. We're all the same, period. So this is even a higher level than the Alter Rebbe. Rabbi Zusha Anipal, who installed the Alter Rebbe, he heard from his brother, Rabbi Melech of Lezhensk, that the Hasidim, the students of the Chavraya Kadisha, of Rabbi, the Maggid of Mizrich, used to take turns in taking care of the Maggid. And once Rabbi Melech was there, and then Maggid was lying in his bed, and it was midnight. He turned, he said, Melech, do you hear what they're saying in the heavenly yeshiva, Masifta Dedekiah? They're saying that the Haftal Erecha Kamoicha, you have to love a Rasha Gomer, a complete Rasha, just like you love a complete Tzaddik. Equally. Just like you love a greatest Tzaddik. Imagine you love a Tzaddik. You have to love the biggest Rasha, you have to love him with the same. Even there, you're differentiating. This is a Rasha, this is a Tzaddik. The ultimate love is, what the Rebbe was describing is that every Jew's essence is divine, is godly. There's no differentiation. There's no Rasha, there's no Tzaddik. Every Jew is a piece of the divine essence. It's every Jew, and that's what I love. I love the essence of every Jew. That is that Jew's truth, core and essential truth. Whether he knows it or not, acknowledges it or not, is aware of it or not, it doesn't change the reality. That Jew, whose very core and essence is 100% Jewish, 100% divine, 100% godly, 100% holy. And that's why you have to love every Yid. So loving your fellow Jew, you have to have the highest level that a person could reach is when you develop like a chush, a feeling, a sense of enjoyment, of pleasure in helping your fellow Jew. When you eagerly look forward to the ability to help a Jew, when you come alive when you help a fellow Jew, you have a feeling for it, a sense for it. It's a chush, that people have a certain feeling for song, music, they have a feeling for art, they have a feeling for intellect also. They have a feeling, they feel it. It's more than just doing it. They have a certain sense of it, a feeling for it. A person has to develop a feeling for love your fellow Jew like yourself. A talent, a feeling for it, a sense of it. He has to enjoy it. He has to find pleasure in it. That's the highest level that a Jew can reach. When you develop a pleasure in doing a favor for your fellow Jew. The Baal Shem Tov once said that a Jew comes down to this world and lives 70 years. 70 years of living. And all for what reason? To do one favor for your fellow Jew. One favor, once in your lifetime. Could be a material favor, could be a spiritual favor. We don't know what that favor is. But it could be that the whole reason your neshama came down into this world is for that one favor that you did to your fellow Jew. It could be any time of the day, any time of the night, any day of the year, at any age. I don't know. But every time you have an opportunity to do a favor, you have to ask yourself, maybe that's the one favor. And that's the one reason my neshama came down into this world. All that trauma and all that drama and all that, everything was only for this moment to do that one favor. And for that alone, it was worth the whole trip, and the whole journey, and everything that's accompanied with it was all worthwhile just to fulfill that divine mission, to do that one favor. So you can imagine how we have to approach the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael. He once asked the Alter Rebbe, which is greater, love your fellow Jew like yourself or love Hashem? You have two mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of Yehavtas Hashem Elokecha, which is really what davening is all about. The whole davening is focused on to fulfill and experience the mitzvah of love your fellow Jew like love Hashem, Yehavtas Hashem Elokecha, and the Shema. You also have a mitzvah to love your fellow Jew like yourself. So they asked Alter Rebbe, which of these two mitzvahs is greater? So Alter Rebbe answered, love your fellow Jew like yourself. Which would really explain why it's placed right before davening. He says, because v'hafta Hashem Elokecha is the explanation for loving Hashem. I mean, loving your fellow Jew is what leads you to love Hashem. Because when you love a Jew, why would you love your fellow Jew like yourself? It doesn't come from your ego. My ego couldn't care less about anyone but itself. Why would I really care and love someone else? It's godly, because I love the Jew within the Jew. The whole loving your fellow Jew like yourself is selfless, it's godly. So that's the entree, that's the opening, that's the introduction, that leads me. Inevitably, that will lead me to love Hashem. If you genuinely love your fellow Jew, you will inevitably come, and that will lead you to love Hashem. You think you love Hashem. If you start out with loving Hashem, you may never end up with loving your fellow Jew. Which tells me that my love of Hashem is not for real. Maybe it's delusional. Maybe I love myself. Lord, get me high. What can God do for me today? I'm on an ego trip. Spirituality could be the ultimate ego trip. How do I know that my love of Hashem is genuine, is for real? If the portal, if the gateway is love your fellow Jew like yourself. That's the introduction. That's the explanation. That's what will lead me. That's the gateway that will lead me to it. Then I know that my love, when I'll experience in davening, love Hashem, it's for real. Because if I love my fellow Jew, it's a purely selfless act. Why in the world would I love someone else? My body only cares about its own myself. My ego only cares about itself. I couldn't care less about anyone else. It's only because I love the godliness in the other Jew. I love the Jew within the other Jew. So I care about godliness. That means I care about Hashem. So that's the introduction. That's the portal. That's the gateway. You can't start davening unless you establish that I love my fellow Jew like myself. Alter Rebbe once said on himself, he spoke very openly once. He said, I take upon myself Mesiras Nefesh. I'm ready to give up my life for Avos Yisrael. Until Mashiach comes, I'm ready to give up my life to instill the love of your fellow Jew like yourself. And he said, every Jew experiences Mesiras Nefesh. When you read the Shema, then you have to be ready to give up your life for Hashem. You have to think that Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. You love Hashem with all your heart and all your soul and all your being, that a Jew is to be ready to sacrifice his life for Hashem's sake. If push came to shove, I love Hashem so much that I'm ready to give up my life for Hashem, if that's what it takes. But that's during Shema. Alter Rebbe says, I have that all the time. And I'm ready to sacrifice myself for Avos Yisrael, till Mashiach comes, to instill Avos Yisrael amongst the Jewish people. And this is something, this week this Shabbos is the 70th anniversary since the Rebbe became Rebbe. Yud Shvat, the yahrzeit of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the 71st yahrzeit of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, 70 years since the Rebbe officially became Rebbe, accepted the position. And in that first Maimer, the Rebbe spoke about, the end of the Maimer, he spoke about Avos Yisrael. And he said that the Rebbes, the Rabbeim, taught us by example. They didn't just preach. They actually lived and showed us what true, genuine Avos Yisrael is. And the Rebbe went and started telling stories of each of the Rebbes, examples. So the Alter Rebbe says the famous story, that once on Yom Kippur, the Rebbe was davening in Shul in Yom Kippur. Suddenly the Alter Rebbe took off his talus, and he went on Yom Kippur, he went and chopped wood, because there was a mother who gave birth to a child. She was alone in her hut. Her life was in danger. She was alone. She was cold. So Alter Rebbe took off his talus, middle of Yom Kippur, went and chopped wood, went to the hut, warmed her up, lit a fire, cooked something, helped her out. The Alter Rebbe on Yom Kippur, he could have sent his shamash, could have sent his gabbai, he could have sent anyone else. No. Mitzvah v'gadol, he went himself just to help, because he felt this woman was in danger, was in pain, and he dropped everything, and he went to chop wood and to make a fire and cook her some soup and feed her. So this wasn't just talk, this was action. Literally, love your fellow Jew like yourself. He says the Mittler Rebbe, one young chassid came in, he was complaining about the struggles that young people have, their sexual struggles that they have, and he's pouring his heart out, and he was sharing his intimate life with the Mittler Rebbe and the struggles and conflicts that he has. And the Mittler Rebbe rolled up his sleeves and he says, you should know, from your struggles and your difficulties, my skin is all like dried up, is shriveled up. Because the Mittler Rebbe was, from all the Rebbes, the Mittler Rebbe was like, lived in a different universe, lived in a different world. He would go into trances every Monday and Thursday, and he would, for hours, he would meditate. He can speak Hasidus. Once he spoke Hasidus, 17 hours straight without interruption. He wrote the longest, the deepest Hasidus. I mean, the Mittler Rebbe was in a different world. And here he was so connected to this young Chassid, with his struggles, which was so beyond the world of the Mittler Rebbe, and yet because of his Avos Yisrael, because he loved your fellow Jew like yourself, he so identified with him and became one with him, that his sins and his challenges and difficulties physically affected the health and the life of the Mittler Rebbe. The Tzemach Tzedek told a story, that the Tzemach Tzedek, once in his life, the Alter Rebbe would appear, after the Alter Rebbe passed away, Alter Rebbe would appear to him, teach him and learn with him and answer all his questions. And once he didn't see the Alter Rebbe for a long time, and he thought, why is Alter Rebbe upset at me? Why, maybe I'm not worthy? What happened? He couldn't figure it out. Why all of a sudden he has this richuk? Alter Rebbe is not. And one morning he was in shul, getting ready for davening, right before davening. It's a perfect story. And he was, putting on his talus and the Jew came to him and says, Rebbe, please, I need a loan. The marketplace this morning, So in Lubavitch, the marketplace, I need a loan, so I should be able to do some business. Someone says, listen, middle of davening, let me finish davening, and then as soon as I finish davening, I'll go home and I'll get you the money. And as he's getting ready, putting on his talus and getting ready for davening, someone said, they think to himself, wait a minute, the marketplace is very early. By the time I finished davening, and someone said they took his time in davening. It was a very slow davening. By the time I get home and I give him, it could be he'll lose his business opportunity. He has to make a living. It wasn't that much or whatever he needed, a few ruble that he needed, but his life depended on it. His family, he had to feed his family. So that someone said they immediately put down his towels, took off his towels, ran home, found money, and ran after this Jew, found this Jew, gave him the money, and so he was able to do business, and he went back. And as soon as he came back to shul, he put on his towels and washed his hands. Alter Rebbe appeared to him with a huge smile, and he answered all of his questions. So that act of Avos Yisrael, which preceded his davening, Alter Rebbe, someone said he stopped his davening before his davening, put it all down, put it all on halt, and ran to help this Jew. And then he was able to daven. Then he had a whole different level of davening, whole different experience. So it was Avos Yisrael that he was ready to sacrifice his spirituality for a fellow Jew. That's why you say Hareini Mikabel before you daven. Not just you're ready to sacrifice your physical inconvenience, you're ready to inconvenience yourself for your fellow Jew. You're even ready to sacrifice your spiritual self for your fellow Jew. That's real Avos Yisrael. His own spiritual growth and development and time to help a fellow Jew, and that took precedence. Then he merited to really daven. That means he was truly reached the highest levels. And then he told the famous story that Rabbi Marash passed away the youngest of all the Rebbes, lived the shortest. And so so he was basically 48 years old. And he was a Rebbe for 17 years, less. So, and he lived his life very, very intense. Like he used to be up very early. Many times, 8 o'clock in the morning, it was already after davening. Everything was done very quickly. Once, he took a trip from Lubavitch, went to Paris. He took 2 of his rich Hasidim with him. And he booked himself in the biggest, fanciest, richest hotel in Paris. And the Hasidim, even though they were rich, they didn't want to spend them. They went to another hotel. The Rebbe took a nice room. And then he asked, where's the casino? Or the bars? So they took him. And there was a young Jew there. And the Rebbe Marash sat down right in front of this Jew. And the Jew was busy drinking, wine. They were wining and dining him. And of course, it was non-kosher wine. And the Rebbe Marash touched his hand. He says, young man, young man. Yayin Nesach, wine, which is basically, literally means it's spilled, it's poured. So non-Jewish wine that was touched by a non-Jewish wine is metamtem es halev es hamoyach. It clogs up the Jewish heart and it clogs up the Jewish mind. And then he picked himself up and he walked out. And the Rebbe Marash was so excited, or he was so that he didn't even notice that they didn't have elevators then. You're talking about in the 19th century. Instead, in these fancy hotels, they had people acting as elevators in the hallway that you would sit down and they would carry you from floor to floor. So he was so shaken, or like that he didn't even notice that they picked him up and they took him to a different floor. And then of course, they brought him back to his room. And a little while later, this Jew knocked on. He inquired who was this Jew who spoke to him. And he went to his room and they had a long talk. And he became a Baal Tshuva. He became the father of a beautiful family and friends, family of God-fearing Jews. And he made him into a Baal Tshuva. Later on, he said, it's been hundreds of years, such a holy neshama hasn't come down into this world. And he was like in the depth of Klippa. He was like in the depth of the opposite of impurity, the opposite of holiness. So the Rebbe Marash, sitting in Lubavitch, in Russia, in those days, it was a big deal to travel. And his life, every minute, every second was so precious. You know, the few Farbrengens we had was very short. Everything was short. Everything, he lived a very concentrated life. And yet he sacrificed himself, his time. He went all the way just to make one Baal Tshuva, just to save his neshama in the depth of the Klippa and the Tumah, and to reconnect him and return him back, restore his neshama and restore him back to Hashem. And the Rebbe told the story of the Rebbe Rashab. Rebbe Rashab, his younger years, there was a decree in Moscow against the Jewish people. And he got ready to travel, to go to Moscow to nullify this decree. His older brother, the Razah, suggested, his younger brother, the Rebbe, he says, why don't you let me go? He says, firstly, I speak Russian better than you. Rebbe Rashab's Russian wasn't so perfect. He says, I speak languages. He spoke many languages. And your time is precious. You're the Rebbe. Your time is precious. You stay in Lubavitch. You can learn. You can daven. I'll take care of business. Rebbe Rashab refused. Said, no, I have to go in person. The Jewish lives are at stake here. It's to help the Jewish people, even physically, not just. And he went and he succeeded. And you see his love your fellow Jew like yourself, it was real. It wasn't just that he sacrificed everything, sacrificed his time and he had to in person try whatever he could to help the Jewish people. He says in the previous Rebbe, he saw so many times throughout his life how he sacrificed himself for the sake of a fellow Jew, even one individual Jew, not just for the whole Jewish people. Even the Jew was like the edge of the world, is so far away from the level, the heights, and the lofty level of the previous Rebbe, and yet he sacrificed himself and put everything aside just to help that Jew. So the Rebbe's taught us by personal example. And that was the hallmark of Hasidism. Hasidim loved each other like brothers. It was like a natural love. They had a feeling everything was loving and good and kind, and what's mine is yours. And they would say, love your fellow Jew like yourself, because I love the Jew even more than I love myself. Because I'm myself, I know my faults. And the other Jew, I only see good things. I don't notice any faults. I don't focus on the fault. It doesn't bother me. And this was the hallmark of Hasidim. There was a genuine love between the Hasidim. And so that's the first thing. Before you daven, before you approach Avodas HaTfilah, before you serve Hashem, by davening, the first thing we have to do is we have to accept upon ourselves. Love my fellow Jew like myself. And not just say it, but live it, implement it, mean it, work on it. And that's the portal, that's the door. That's the beginning. That's the introduction to davening. Next week, please God, we'll start Matoivu. We'll start the introduction to davening. And everyone have a wonderful evening. And if you're in town, please join us this Shabbos for Shabbaton, Friday night dinner, and a grand Kiddush, Fabrengen. So until next week, have a wonderful week.
Shkoyach, Rabbi. Thank you.
Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Good night, Rabbi.
Good
night.
You want to say hi to Benny?
Oh, wow.
Hi.
Rabbi.
Hi, Benny.
This is
Shemai
your namesake. Come. Go to your bed.
What's my answer?
He has the same name as you, right? Want to say Shema?
Yeah, easy. Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kavod V'Shalom.
Beautiful. Okay.
A lot of laughing.
We're going to say the rest, okay?
Have a good night.
Shema.